Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Welcome back to the Cloudcast. I'm your host, Brian Gracely. Aaron, good to have you back. And we have a full house today, man. We got a lot of folks and a lot of good topics to talk about today. How you been?
I'm good. How have you been? How's the world traveling been? You're in the middle of your Brian Gracely Fall World Tour.
About halfway done, going to London, Paris, and Madrid this next week, and then some other places after that. So yeah, lots of traveling. But well, listen, we've got a topic that you and I talk about all the time, and we're joined by a couple of folks that we've followed for a long time. Forrest has been on the show before. Emily's our new friend, but sort of internet friend that we followed for a long time. But we're going to dig into sort of this thing that we've talked about a lot, which is sort of the fine line between technical discussions, the things that a lot of our techies like to talk about, and the things that companies and businesses want, which is they want your attention. And how do we find that right blend between the two of them? So very excited today to have both Emily Freeman as well as Forrest Brazeal, who are well known in the cloud community, but now have started Freeman and Forrest. Emily, welcome to the show. Forrest, welcome to the show. Well, Forrest, welcome back to the show. So great to have you both on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started with all the things that you guys are working on, for anybody who's been under a rock and isn't aware of all the things you do, Emily, why don't you start? Give us a little bit of your background, and then Forrest, I'll let you jump in right after that.
I love that. I'm Emily Freeman. I'm co-founder with Forrest of Freeman and Forrest, an influencer marketing agency. And prior to that, I ran community and DevOps product marketing at AWS. And prior to that, DevRel at Microsoft. So I'm taking a break from the clouds and working on this.
That's great. Yes, I'm Forrest Brazeal. I'm a co-founder with Emily. I'm the lesser half of Freeman and Forrest. We decided to go for alliteration over consistency. So we've got her last name and my first name in the company name. But the reason we did that was just to we wanted to make sure that if we're taking companies' brands in our hands, we wanted to put our own names up as collateral. So that's why the company is named Freeman and Forrest. Before starting this business with Emily earlier this year, I was the head of developer media at Google Cloud, which is a completely made up title, but aren't all titles made up?
Yes.
I was just responsible for trying to tell the Google Cloud story to our amazing technical communities. And I sort of come out of the engineering world prior to that. I used to be what's called an AWS hero, so an unpaid developer advocate basically for AWS. I've been here and there, and it kind of feels like what we're doing now, at least for me, is just a natural evolution, even a culmination of the things I've been working on for many years to get up to this point.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I for folks that are sort of going, well, hang on a second, you guys rarely ever do marketing stuff on the show. Like, why are you doing that? And I think it really goes back to the origin of this show, which has always been, Aaron and I are always trying to find ways to talk about our industry that both talk about the technology, but also talk about the business value of it. And so we always have had kind of an old school title that used to be called like technical marketing and some other things. But that line has always been very, very interesting to us. I'll start with this. So you two were both, in the middle of some of the biggest clouds. So you were obviously, writing books, talking about technology around techies. And you started this new company. I'm curious, just at a really big picture perspective, like what is the thesis of where is the fine line between the right way to talk about technology, introduce new things to people, and let's just call it marketing for, because that's what people know about, but sort of making things, aware of stuff. What's new, what's interesting, where are you guys trying to focus these days?
Emily?
I love this question. I would say, I think in tech, we have this sort of false bifurcation between tech and marketing. And we also adhere to this, all marketing is yucky approach. And I just don't believe it. And we go to lengths to avoid marketing. I mean, PLG, product-led growth, like if that's not just an avoidance of marketing, I don't know what is. It's like, no, we don't need that. And I think, in tech or anything else, there is a need to not just develop a great product that is absolutely necessary, but to also understand how to message that product so that people understand what is the value, how are you helping me, what problem is this solving, and also positioning the product so that everyone understands how this fits in the market. Why would I choose X over Y? What's the benefit over here? How does this fit into my stack? That is all technical marketing. And this idea that is somehow yucky or we should avoid it is silly. It's not trying to trick people. It's explaining the product in a way that anyone can understand.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Sense. Go ahead, Forrest.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, and this is coming from having been an engineer for many years and have experienced a lot of bad marketing directed toward me. It's not that, engineers don't like marketing. They're just, they prefer to be spoken to directly. And I think a lot of, marketers aren't used to that. There's sort of a standard American marketing voice that crops up in all of us, whether we're professional marketers or not, when we're trying to sell things. And there's certain keywords you can look for there. One example would be, if you find yourself writing some copy and you're starting with a question, something like, struggling to optimize your data pipelines? Question mark. You can never recover from starting a paragraph that way. You are now in standard American marketing voice, and you've lost every engineer who's ever going to read that. Or whether, and maybe the next sentence is like, whether you are an engineer or a CIO. Anytime you have whether you're X or Y, you've now fallen into standard American marketing voice, and nobody's going to listen. It's why, ironically, some of the folks that I find who are best at writing what's technically marketing copy, but is actually helpful copy directed toward engineers are folks whose first language is not English. They're folks who haven't internalized that marketing voice over years and years, right? And so they find that they're just speaking more honestly and directly. Like you'd tell a friend, this is why I think this is worthwhile. Here's how I would relate this. So I think it's just, you talk about where that fine line is. It's approaching it with the intent to educate and inform rather than the intent to sound like a marketer. And that's harder than you might think because it's so ingrained in us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Brent.
No, I was going to say, I think another telltale sign of that is when you find yourself writing things and you're just like word, comma, word, comma, word, comma. And it's outstanding. It's expansive. It scales, and you're like, you haven't. And I think it's what Emily said. You haven't grabbed the essence of like, what is the thing that you do? You're trying to be sort of all things for all people, and I think we get sloppy on that. In our positioning, which happens to be marketing as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think great marketing, you don't even know that it's great marketing. Like it goes unnoticed. It's like great design. You take it for granted. Right. It's only when it is, very obviously poorly done that you're like, ugh.
Exactly. Or I would even argue it's not even so much that it goes unnoticed as it's actively loved. Some of the best marketing things directed toward technical people are embraced by the community because they understand the community. They come in with the intent to help and uplift and support, and that's what we try to do at Freeman and Forrest.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so a question for y'all, because I really want to dig into this whole concept of you've got influencers and influence marketing now, but. I mean, in the early days, it was just like, okay, you built a community and then those community people had tags, right? Like VMware vExperts or AWS Heroes or some of these others, right? And what's the fine line there between like, okay, this is community and this is influence marketing, right? Because I also think that's another very, very fine line at times and how you have those conversations. And it's something y'all have been exposed to both sides of that. Over the years. So tell everyone a little bit about that too.
Yeah, that's right. I've been very directly on both sides of this because, as I've already mentioned, I was an AWS hero, quote unquote, on the community side before I went to Google. And then at Google, I helped to run the Google Cloud Champion Innovators Program, which is their equivalent of the hero program for that ecosystem. And one of the big things that I learned going through that process is a lot of those quote unquote community programs are pretty asymmetrical in the sense that a lot of times the company is extracting a lot more from the community than they are giving in return. And they are giving things in return. There's this sense of, wanting to spin these community programs sometimes as, it's unpaid. It's, we're just recognizing folks who are doing great work, but it is paid. It's paid in kind, right? It's paid with status. It's paid with, access to swag and early access to products, things like that. So there's compensation there after a fashion. And I think a lot of times it can create this weird relationship where you're a spokesperson for the company, but you're not, but you kind of are. So you can't really say anything too critical, right? But also you want to maintain this fiction of distance, right? It creates this weird incentive, and all of the value really from that you're sort of shaving off of your own personal credibility, that just accrues back to the company. So I believe that those programs can be extractive. They are not always. Some of them are run well. I think the AWS Year program is actually run very well in that respect. But all the incentives point in the wrong direction. And so, while we love communities and we want to support communities, we feel like it's also really important to give people an opportunity to get actually paid for stuff that they do. We think that that's we've seen what these companies' marketing budgets are. We know that the money is there. We'd rather it go to people that need it.
Yeah. What's so I'm curious. So both of you and Aaron and myself we sort of live, at least from the technology domain, we sort of live in the kind of enterprise side of technology, the business side of technology, less the sort of consumer side of things. It feels to me like the consumer side of the world, whether it's like an iPhone or makeup or, sports drinks or whatever, has figured out how to kind of create the idea of, we showcase what the product does, but we do it in a way that you're like, that's what I want. I want to be that person. I want to be that lifestyle. We haven't really figured that out in the technology space. And I don't know if it's because the people that represent it, like you said, Forrest, have that sort of is this me that they like? Is it the thing that they like? Or is it more, we don't, in sort of enterprise technology, we make complicated stuff. It's hard to sort of be like, this one thing will, help you, lose 10 pounds or will make you look amazing. It's like, oh no, you need 16 different widgets and CLIs and stuff. And then maybe you'll get some DevOps goodness. What is the new sort of formula, or what formula are you guys kind of exploring to bring out this enterprise ability to share with people, to educate people like we sort of come to know in the the influencer space, the consumer space?
It's a great question, and I think you've nailed it. Fashion, cosmetics, these are places where influencer marketing is incredibly well established. They're spending billions of dollars a year. You're also correct that Kubernetes is harder to influence than lip gloss. It's like there's no Kubernetes lifestyle, though some people would really like that. And so I think, it comes back to, you have to be authentic with the audience. We live in a technical community. You have to show up, understand the value of something, and then showcase how you can actually utilize a product to better your life. I mean, developer experience is a very real thing. And I've seen a little bit of a shying away from that over the last year or 2 years because it's been so focused on developer productivity, which benefits, obviously outcomes for the company. Right. But developer experience is a huge element of this because it saves time. It makes people enjoy their job. And if you can that's just one aspect, but if you can drive home, not only does this tool solve your problem, here's how to implement it, and here are the benefits, and do that authentically, that's incredibly powerful. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, it is different than B2C. The big bet that Forrest and I took was that B2B in tech influencer marketing would work, and it has.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so give us a sense real quick too, because we kind of talked a little bit around the edges of this, but I mean, especially B2B, I mean, the market's pretty crowded today. So tell everyone a little bit about why is this so important, the value and impact of this, and a little bit about the program itself.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think every strategy for reaching people, any channel, any distribution strategy for reaching people has a natural shelf life. There was a time when you'd send people SMS messages and they'd have like an 80% open rate. And then people figured out that was being used to market to them, and all that stuff started going to spam, right? And that's no longer a viable way to have like a genuine interaction with someone if you're a marketer. I think the same we're seeing is true to some extent with like display ads on social media, right? We're hearing from a lot of clients who are getting increasingly poor results from paid ads on Facebook, obviously on Twitter, obviously, even on LinkedIn and other places. So every strategy has its lifespan. I think where we are right now, it's very clear that technical people are not making their buying decisions, their purchasing decisions based on things they're hearing from, display ads. They are making their decisions based on things they hear from their peers. And sometimes we call the places where they're doing that second locations. If your first location is, swimming in the main public social media stream, that second location would be, it's the private Signal group, the WhatsApp group, the Slack channel, the Discord server, where you're hanging out with a dozen people that you really trust. And when a new product comes across your radar, you're going to put a link to it in that group, and you're going to say, hey, has anybody tried this? What's your, feeling about this? Is this something that I should take a second look at? I mean, I'm personally in some of those groups. I have technical friends that I ask those exact questions of, right? So I'm speaking from experience here. So kind of the founding insight of Freeman and Forrest was, how do we help companies reach those audiences in an appropriate, relatable, authentic way, without forcing them to rely on kind of these poor, low-targeted, broad, public-facing mechanisms that are available to them today through paid placements. So for us, that looks like, reaching out through newsletters, through podcasts like this one, potentially. Although, to be clear, I don't believe we're paying you for this.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Or that you're paying us. I'm not even sure which direction that would go. But anyway, this is just friends having a conversation.
That's right.
But we do sponsor podcasts and newsletters when we know we have a niche that's, it has a great open rate and is reaching folks who really care about, what that particular technology subset is. And we found that, we're able to deliver results just from a numbers perspective that blow out of the water anything you can get through those more diffuse public channels. Again, this strategy, like all strategies, will have a natural lifespan. There will be something new that we're all doing in 5 years, I have no doubt. But, we thought it was best to spend some time focusing on that rather than just being reactive.
Yeah. I'm curious Freeman and Forrest is still fairly new. You guys are probably at a super steep learning curve at this point. But one of the things that Aaron and I have sort of lived through over the last decade plus is we've watched the transformation of the people who kind of fit into this technical marketing domain, right? So in the early days, they made a name for themselves. They were helping their companies because they had hands-on skills, and so they would build, like home labs, and they would build a blog out of that. And we saw people get sort of, famous for their blog that had in-depth technical stuff. But it was like, oh, but Steve is really smart, or whatever it was. And then we started seeing the evolution of the sort of, the visibility of that. In some cases, it was podcasts. In other cases, it was, I want to be Kelsey Hightower and speak at events. And I have a shtick at speaking at events such that, people were like, oh, wow, I can't miss that keynote, right? And you've seen other people who have sort of taken that and done like the Josh Long thing with like the Spring Community, where he gets, packed houses just to see him build stuff. What are if you were speaking to folks who are like, hey, I ride the fence. I'm technical, but I communicate well, or I have, I'm not afraid of that. Like, what do you feel like are the new skills that would support what this modern media looks like? You guys mentioned newsletters and stuff, but are there things that you're seeing like the best people do or the best companies do that, if there was more of them, this way of communicating would expand more? Does that make any sense?
It does completely. And I think, when we're talking about this, it's also important to note that influencer marketing and developer relations sort of came up at a certain time and had a lot of overlap for a period. And now, due to quote unquote macroeconomic conditions, the market is constrained, and a lot of folks have downsized their marketing teams, their developer relations teams, and it felt like, oh, we're in a good place, it's fine, except suddenly there's a gap, right? Because you had all these people that were specialists in your specific technology, who understood it, who were deep in it, and could communicate that value to technical audiences, and they're no longer there. And there's a hole being felt in a lot of companies right now. And so that's sort of one part of it. The other part of it is, again, to what Forrest was saying, you, as technical human beings, we do not look in an advertisement and think, oh, you're right. You're right. I should need that. I need that synergy. It just doesn't resonate, right? We're like, okay, we'll see. But if someone you actually trust has implemented it or has a good idea about it and speaks authentically from their voice, that's a totally different scenario. And so I think when people look at, I don't like the idea of like becoming an influencer, because that's a little bit premeditated. I think you have to start with, this is my area of expertise. I have a natural curiosity. I'm unafraid of learning in public. I'm open to being vulnerable in that way. You mentioned Josh Young, like it takes a bold human with a lot of gumption to get up and, whether it's on Twitch or live, really kind of dig into something technical with an audience. That's hard to do. And mistakes will be made, and you have to be open and vulnerable in that way. But people love that because you're being completely genuine and authentic and truthful. And the more you can add your unique point of view and your voice to it, the more powerful you become.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would just say, one of the most rewarding ways I think we've been able to connect these creators with brands in the community is by just giving them the opportunity to build projects. So you say, hey, here's a tool we'd like you to check out. Maybe use this language because you've been wanting to learn that anyway, and just go build an open source project with it and then write up what you learn. We often say that our quote unquote influencers are, a brand is renting their attention, but not their opinion. Right. So, you can get access to someone's, home lab and, have them build something on your behalf and check out the product and then share their feedback. It's probably not going to be uniformly positive, but, for the brands that we work with, the majority of them get that, that's what you would want anyway. You want developers to be banging on this thing, finding the rough edges, talking about it, creating a conversation. You don't want them to just be sort of shills, parroting some positioning document.
Sure.
Yeah. And Forrest, let me ask you a follow-up question to that too. It was interesting to me, like this concept of what does it look like to get started these days? And like what technologies, oh no, wait, hold on.
Brian, stay with us.
There, bro.
You okay, dude? You okay? I'm usually the one coughing.
Guys on screen. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
There's no way we could keep going with that. All right. So
please continue. I'm alive.
Yes. Brian's still good. Thumbs up. Yeah, there we go. So what I was going to ask Forrest was like, if somebody's like, hey, not necessarily I want to go be an influencer, but if somebody wants to start digging in and like, what are some of the interesting tools and frameworks right now? And I know that's a very timely question because I feel like it changes constantly. But I'm sure it's also something that both of you get this question on a regular basis of like, I want to get started, but I don't know where to start. What do you think?
That's right.
What's your answer to something like that these days?
Well, first off, we grow influencers. We have to, because there's just not enough folks that do this, right? To meet the incredible demand that's out there. We are, as I was saying to you all before, we are supply constrained, not demand constrained in this business. So we're always looking for folks who have that urge to, create, build, learn in public. And we will match folks with things that, they're genuinely passionate about. I mean, to the extent that it's possible to be genuinely passionate about AI right now, I would certainly say that's probably a place where you can find a lot of demand for what you're doing, right? There's just such a huge cry right now for people that understand how a large language model is put together and what the heck RAG is and all this other stuff. So if you've got an inclination in that direction, check it out. But as so much of the, so many of the corporate dollars are being sucked into that conversation, that does create giant swaths of the larger technical community that are not being as well served. I mean, we're seeing like entire in-house developer relations teams all refocused to work on AI right now. And there's just very little great content and education being created in, your bread and butter basic areas of language frameworks and the compute and data and networking parts of a cloud stack. So the short answer is, there's really no way to go wrong. I mean, any possible technology you can imagine, there's going to be folks that need to hear your voice. It's more about what you care about and are interested in, and what you maybe have professional experience and credibility in, right? That's just as important, rather than opining about something that you're just sort of hello worlding your way through.
Yeah.
The best example for this is PHP. 5 years ago, you're like, I'm going to be an influencer in PHP. We would have laughed at them, but Laravel has come forward and is killing it. And so it's like, it doesn't really matter. You have to come forward with your point of view, your specific voice, be authentic, and learn in public. I think that's the magic sauce.
Yeah. I think each of us underestimates how much our personal excitement and passion for something can influence others, right?
Yeah. Are there, I hate to bring this back to sort of like tools and stuff, but like, so I'll give an example why I'm asking this. So one of the reasons why Aaron and I even do this on video, because we did it forever as audio only, was we were always under the impression that like there are places where people talk about work things and there are places that people, sort of do personal things, right? So in our mind, for example, like we would never do stuff on Instagram. We would never do stuff on TikTok, because that seemed like, well, that's where you go have fun. And that's where you waste away hours on the couch. And then we were learning because of the way the algorithms work and because of, it's taking up parts of our time, people were seeing the stuff they do for work in some of these other mediums, right? Are you, and I ask this again from the context of like, not, don't do things that you're not passionate about, but, are you using the right things that are going to help your passion get out there and spread as much as possible? Like, are you seeing people should be doing more stuff via video or some of these platforms where the algorithms take advantage of stuff? Is old school stuff like, written text as newsletters helpful? Like, are you seeing anything in that context where it's like maybe a different form of communication is now emerging that people should pay attention to, because it's going to help you, scale what your passion might be or your knowledge, getting out into the world?
I think for me, this is one of the areas where what is cool is different than what is valuable from a commercial sense. And so when you think about what companies want specifically right now, it is conversions. It's getting folks to a page, reading about a product, trying it out, going to their developer center, their GitHub repo. When you talk about a funnel in that way, certain platforms are going to perform better than others, right? If you're a podcast or a TikTok, you have typically a lower click-through rate in that way. It's much more awareness based, and that's going to be, new companies that are, coming on the market, and they want you to have that brand awareness. That's where podcasts and videos really thrive. I think there is an element of video being, obviously it's flashy, it's interesting. A lot of people want it, but from that conversion rate, it does perform poorer. I think for us, LinkedIn and newsletters are king right now. Forrest, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are the ones that I think we seek out the most, because it has both the reach and that awareness capacity, and it also converts.
Yeah, and we should add, though, that not all newsletters are created equal. We've seen folks who they've got 1 million subscriber list, supposedly, and then you have 15 people that actually click on something, and you're like, well, are you sure?
Right.
If it is 1 million people, it's clearly not people that are in the target demographic that you claim that you're serving. And then on the other hand, we work with amazing folks who have a newsletter that's like 2,000 or 3,000 people, or even less, that are signed up for it. But all of those people control 9-figure IT budgets, and they all read that newsletter avidly and click on every single link in it, right? So there's an element to our part of the business that's very, very much about curating amazing partners who just kill it in their niche, and then making sure they're really well taken care of. So yeah, we're always on the lookout for that.
Yeah, good stuff. Let me ask you one last question, because you guys are busy business owners, and a lot of things going on. One real quick, good example, and maybe one sort of bad example. If people were saying, "Hey, what does this look like? What does success or not success look like?" What might you point them to? Not to necessarily call out anybody as being bad, but what does a good look like, and what's a bad look like?
Emily.
Yeah, give me the hard one. I'm going to make
you go on record with this.
Here's my list. No, I think, some of the best influencers are people, again, I feel like I say this constantly because it's true. They show up as themselves. They are kind. They're curious. They want to learn, grow, and share with the community. Though that is the gold standard. I think when you're talking about people that are, at least less interesting to Forrest and myself, is really folks that are what I would call like ghost pepper hot, right? Like influencers should be what I call jalapeno spicy, right? You're like a little bit opinionated, you're interesting. But if you're just blasting people or being mean, and that's to humans, companies, brands, products, there is a way to criticize work and product usability without being cruel. And I think, it's something that shows up because people rise really quickly, because it just triggers something in our limbic system, and we're like, that's interesting. Let's watch more of them just ripping apart this company. But I think those careers are somewhat limited, and at some point it just doesn't become interesting anymore. And it doesn't align with, our values, at least at Freeman and Forrest.
That's right. And as an influencer, you want to think about, what are you doing this for? Hopefully you're doing it because you want to leave the world a better place than you found it, right? And to an extent, obviously, advocating for change where that's necessary is a really important part of this. But if you find that you're engagement farming, first and foremost, whether that's positive or negative, we see lots of engagement farming out there that's not strictly negative, but it's just, it's a lot of sort of chasing whatever the news of the moment is, and providing a lot of low calorie content, commentary that doesn't really add anything. You are going to find that pretty soon the serious people stop taking you seriously. And I don't think what most of us want out of our career.
Yeah, good stuff. Aaron, any last thoughts before we let these two fine folks get on with their day?
No, I think it's time. We let them go. There's certainly, thank you for your time, Emily. Thank you for your time, Forrest.
This was lovely. Thank you.
Real quick before we wrap up, best way for folks to engage with you guys. Obviously, there's the website, but what's sort of best way for folks to tap into your new expertise?
Yeah, freemanandforrest.com. There's an influencer form on there if you're interested in becoming one of our influencers and getting in our group of amazing folks. And then hey@Freeman and Forrest is a great email if you have specific questions for us.
Okay. Good stuff. Fantastic. Well, thank you both for the time today. Thanks for being on. Thanks for saving me from dying halfway through the show. And it's good to see you both. Folks, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a space that I think if Aaron and I summarized what the show has always been trying to do is, try and find what that sweet spot is between talking about this technology, because we're all sort of interested and we're technologists at heart, but also realizing that technology is typically only used to solve business problems and to sort of forward humanity and stuff. So really excited to see you guys exploring what comes next in this space and helping companies reduce some of the noise that's in the marketplace. So our best wishes to both of you. Aaron, I think as we always say, thank you all for the time. Aaron, you want to take us home, wrap us up, and take us home?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if you're still with us, thank you very much. We appreciate you listening. We would love to hear your feedback as well. Show@thecloudcast.net. And wherever you get your podcast, if you can leave us a review, we would certainly love that as well. So on behalf of Brian and myself, thank you everyone for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.